Welcome once again. This is Pinnacle Professional College, and today we will be beginning a series on understanding how to analyze case studies. So we'll be using past or previous past questions to be able to give us that understanding. We'll be doing this every Sunday at 4 p.m. And so we would be going live, and then we would be explaining some of these concepts in order for you to have a grasp or feel around case study analysis. So if you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments. I know you might have some questions as we go along. Please do not hesitate to ask questions. Don't hesitate to ask questions. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so that anytime we go live analyzing these analyzing these case studies, you will be essentially notified, and you will not miss out on these lectures. So first of all, one of the things I entreat students to do is that you need to go into the ICA website, and then it's always crucial to read the examiner's report, right? To understand what are some of the things that students did well and some of the things they usually do not do well at, right? So it's very, very important. So in the first page of this report, you'd see the performance of candidates. And we are being told here that the overall performance was poor. You know, most of the candidates scored 0 marks for most of the questions. The candidates displayed a lack of knowledge of business issues, right? So one of the key things is that, you know, candidates did not show that they had that business acumen and what their strategic implications are. Take note of these words, because these words are very, very crucial for you to understand, you know, exactly how to approach the case study. And it also appears that most of the candidates did not prepare well for the examinations. So one of the key things to do in preparing for strategic case study is not just studying the text, right? You have to get past questions and familiarize yourself with the concepts in order to be able to pass, right? Because the application side is more important than just memorizing the text. So again, you look at the notable strengths and weaknesses. And the weaknesses, you see that there was a poor understanding of business issues, right? And the candidates were ignorant about hedging transactions, you know. And they also did not understand organizational structure as well as the Shell directional policy matrix. So these are things that the students did not do too well. So it's always important when you pick these things up, please read them, try to understand them, study the past questions side by side with your text, and it will bring to life all the concepts. So let's dive straight into the case study, right? And this is how we would approach. So as I'm going along, you would gain ideas on how to approach a pre-seen material, right? So I know you all are very, very interested in this. So you can take your book, you can take your pen, and then you can take notes as you go along. So introduction, right? So this is how I intend to approach it. I intend to analyze each and every sentence and make comments and try and find the strategic implications and the business issues surrounding it, right? So every statement matters here. There's no statement that is just made for fun. Every statement matters, and I'll try and show you what exactly this means. So introduction, the local manufacture of electrical cables and wires began in Ghana nearly 54 years ago when Power and Cable Ghana Limited, a subsidiary of a foreign cable manufacturer, was incorporated in 1968 as the first cable manufacturer in West Africa. So hold it right there. So we are told that, first of all, you know, the local manufacture of cables began in Ghana. So in the whole West African region, the manufacture of electrical cables, it began in Ghana. Now, immediately when you hear something like that, you see this as an opportunity, right? It means that anybody who steps into this market first can likely dominate it, depending on how well they organize themselves and how well they strategize, right? It's very, very important. Very, very important. So this is a local opportunity. Nothing like this has been done in the entire West Africa, right? So first of all, you should think about your models, your SWOT analysis model, your PESTEL framework, and all of that, right? So that's very, very important. You see an opportunity here, right? You see an opportunity here, a huge opportunity that, anyone who steps into the West African region first is going to benefit because they are the only people. And Power and Cable Ghana Limited has been able to do that. So that's a huge thing. And it began nearly 54 years ago, right? So this is half a century, some time back. Another key thing to note here is limited, Power and Cable Ghana Limited. So here you are being told of the structure and legality of the company, right? When you hear limited, right, what does this mean? When you hear limited, you are talking about a limited liability company where the liability or where the liabilities of the company, or in the case that the company goes bankrupt, it's only the resources of the company that would be sold to cover that bankruptcy, not the personal assets of the investors, right? So that's something crucial to know. It's important to understand what are the characteristics of a limited liability company. What are the characteristics of a limited liability company? So you know that a limited liability company is basically the expression is limited liability. So the liability is limited only to the company. The personal individuals behind the company will not get affected in terms of their personal assets, right? Right. So the liability is limited. It's limited. It's not unlimited, right? When we say liability is limited, we simply mean that in the event of any losses or bankruptcy of the company, the personal assets of the individuals who have invested into the company will not be taken to recover the losses of the company. Very, very crucial, because in a limited liability, there's a separation. There's some sort of separation between the owners of the company as well as the managers of the company, right? So number one, we understand that this is Power PCGL, and from now on, I'll refer to them as PCGL. PCGL is a first mover, right, into this terrain, which is West Africa, right? Another thing we note here is that it's a subsidiary of a foreign cable manufacturer. So here you can see the hierarchy, you can see the connection, right? You can see a parent-subsidiary relationship. Now, what are the implications of a parent-subsidiary relationship? In a parent-subsidiary relationship, what you usually see is that the parent will decide on something, right? And then will sometimes pass it on down to its subsidiaries, or subsidiaries sort of imitate what their parents are doing in some sense, right? So a subsidiary of a foreign cable manufacturer, right? So one of the things you need to think about in this case is, this foreign cable manufacturer, what are their policies? What is their vision? And how does it overall affect PCGL as a company? Right? We are told that PCGL was incorporated in 1968 as the first cable manufacturer in West Africa. right? So we've already talked about these things. So even in the first sentence, we can deduce a lot of things. In the first sentence, we can see that PCGL is a first mover into the West African territory when it comes to cable and wires, right? And also, we know that PCGL is a subsidiary. PCGL also is described as limited, and we've talked about that. So these are things that should begin kickstarting in your mind, and you don't read the case study like a novel. You analyze everything, right? You analyze everything. So many years later, two cable manufacturing companies, right? So immediately when I read this, immediately when I read this, two cable manufacturing companies, what I think of is competition. It's competition. And so the competitive model should come to mind, right? The competitive model should come to mind, where we are thinking of things like national competitive advantage, Porter's forces when it comes to competition, the things that affect competition. So these things should come to mind, and we would talk about these things in much more detail as we go along. So many years later, two cable manufacturing companies, a partially Ghanaian-owned company, which is Metalix, and Teknik Cable and Wire Limited, which is wholly Ghanaian-owned, entered the industry in 1992 and 1997, respectively. So you can see that it's only over 20 years after that we see any formidable competition coming in. Right? It's only after over 20 years later. Right? So this is very, very interesting. So what do we think about in terms of competition here? You know, what do we think about in terms of competition? When we look at the country Ghana, right? And we try and understand the country Ghana from, you know, a competitive standpoint, we would realize that because the whole manufacture of electric cables and wires has begun in Ghana, so Ghana would gain a competitive advantage over other West African countries if they utilize this opportunity very, very well. So in this analysis, I would definitely go and look into, you know, the Porter's diamond, right? The Porter's diamond, very, very crucial. The Porter's diamond. I'll go and look into the Porter's diamond and try and understand, you know, what's going on there. At the minute, you are trying to analyze this case sentence by sentence. But I'm trying to bring out these models and concepts that you've been reading from the case. So first of all, we are told that two cable manufacturing companies. One is partially Ghanaian owned, right? So the ownership structure is very, very important. When a company is Ghanaian owned or partially Ghanaian owned, it means that it's likely to understand the needs of Ghanaians. I mean, it has some Ghanaian elements in there. So it's easy for people it's easy for the Ghanaians, you know, to relate with them in some sense, right? So you have these two companies that have showed up later. So my question would be, so during that 20 years, what was PCA, during that over 20 years after which these two companies showed up, what was PCGL doing? You know, what was PCGL doing? And that's what I'm trying to be curious of. And my other question would be, apart from these two companies, additional companies, do we see any other competition coming in, right? Competition coming in. It's very, very important. Very, very important. So this brings it to three. This brings it to three companies engaged in the local manufacturing of cables and wires for local use and export to other African countries. Right. So these were the three companies that were, you know, manufacturing for local use and exports. Right. right? At this point, Ghana still has competitive advantage in this particular industry. Very, very important. So all the three companies are located in the heart of industrialization in the port city of Ghana, Tema, where they have access to some of the best of services and support for their manufacturing activities. Right, so here is talking about location. Now, when you think about location, what exactly does your mind go to, right? Location, which model comes to mind? Now, I'm sure you might have studied the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps, right? So price, product, place, promotion. Now, place, which is one of the Ps, talks about location. So all the three companies are located in the heart of industrialization and in Tema. So these companies are located in one of the best places when it comes to industry. And because of this, it reduces the cost of transporting raw materials to the warehouses, right? So there is an effect, a knock-on effect when it comes to cost in that sense. So that's it when it comes to the introduction. So from the introduction basically will set the stage for the discussion. So a couple of things to note in the introduction. In the introduction, when you're reading it, one of the things you should know, you should always have at the back of your mind is your SWOT analysis. Begin looking for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? So for example, location here for these companies would be a strength and even an opportunity, right? For other companies who would like to come in. So location here is a strength. So be on the lookout for SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Also be on the lookout when we are talking about the external environment and we are looking at PCGL in the context of the external environment, right? Be on the lookout for the PESTEL framework, political factors, the economic factors, your social factors, your technological factors, your ecological factors, and your legal factors. You should be able to analyze PCGL within the context of these factors, right? Also, be on the lookout for, I'm just giving you some basic models to follow. Also, be on the lookout for the 4 Ps, which is product, place, price, and promotion. So in the case of PCG, what's their product? Electrical cables and wires. What's their price? We are not yet told, right? What's the promotional strategy? We are not yet told. We might find out as we go on in the case. Then we also have Porter's Diamond. That's also something to know. Anytime you hear anything in relation, or you read anything in relation to the nation or national competitive advantage, please let your mind go to the Porter's Diamond. Very, very important. Then you also move on to the company. Teknik Cable and Wire Limited. Teknik Cable and Wire Limited. So we are now come to talk about the company, right? So the company here we are going to talk about is Teknik, which is one of the companies that's competing with PCGL. So Mr. Asare Blankson, so here, so you see the structure is the same for a lot of case studies. And if you figure out the structure, you're able to analyze better. So the company, it will talk about the people, their qualifications. Here, I would say be on the lookout for the strengths and weaknesses of the people, right? And any roles that might be missing, any roles that you think are crucial that might be missing. So Mr. Sarah Blankson, who holds first degree in economics from the UK, set up a trading company and subsequently decided to expand into cable manufacturing by incorporating TCWL as contribution to his long-held view that industrialization holds the key to the country's long-term development. Right? So we have a Ghanaian here who studied in the UK in economics and decides that you set up a trading company and then expands it into cable manufacturing because he believes in industrialization. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Now, you clearly see here that Mr. Asari Blankson has international exposure. So it's possible he can bring this international exposure to bear when it comes to TCWL, right? So that's one good thing going for him. So his ultimate interest is to build a company that will survive the test of time and to change the general narrative in the country, where average indigenous Ghanaian businesses remain small, family-owned, and leaving shareholders bankrupt, right? So he wants to change the narrative of Ghanaian businesses. He wants to be the reformer, right? One who would change the tides and, let it be known that Ghanaian businesses can survive the test of time. So that sounds like a very, very nice vision. Sounds like a very, very nice vision. And because of this trend accounts for the low percentage ownership interest in multinational companies by Ghanaians compared to what occurs in other countries. So we are being told of the founder of TCWL, Mr. Asari Blankson. One of the key things is you want to also know the vision, what is stirring up this business, right? And for Mr. Asari Blankson is his belief in Ghanaian businesses, his belief in industrialization. The sole shareholder became the pioneering chief executive officer for many years until he stepped down in early 2022. So he was the sole owner, right? Now, when you hear sole shareholder, right, a lot of things should come into your mind. And this is what the examiner's report is trying to tell you about strategic implications. What are some of the implications of being a sole shareholder? Right? It means that your capital is only limited to you, right? Or limited to maybe banks as well. But when a company allows multiple shareholders, it means that it can raise capital from the public. Right? A sole shareholder, Mr. Sarah Blankson will be funding everything on his own. I will be using loans to fund it. Right? So companies that really want to grow would usually go public and sell their shares in order to raise capital. So the sole shareholder became the CEO for many years until he stepped down. Right? So we want to know, why did he step down? Right? We also see here that he also doubled as the chairman of the board. That's interesting. So the CEO is also the chairman of the board. Now, what do you think about this? When the CEO is also the chairman of the board, does it raise any questions to you, right? Does it raise any questions, right? Just think about it very carefully. He's the CEO and he's the chairman of the board, right? So, one, if you are the CEO and the chairman of the board, one of the key things you think about is that it means that you have a lot of work on you, chairing board meetings, etc. Right? So we see that he later relinquished this position to Dr. Arthur Richardson. The CEO adopted a business model that allowed him to be completely in charge and to have close involvement in the operations of the company. You see, so the chairman of the board, he usually does that to have some kind of strategic oversight. Strategic oversight. Now, if the CEO is doing that work as well as chairing the board, it can be very difficult to handle those two positions. No wonder why we see that he relinquished that position to another person, right? So the CEO adopted a business model that allowed him to be completely in charge and to have close involvement in the operations of the company, because that's what you want the CEO to be doing, to be totally involved in the operations of the company and not like, be doing two things at the same time. And also you would want someone who is a different person to chair your board just for separation of powers, right? For separation of powers and to ensure that one person is not absolutely corrupted by power. You give another person the board chairman and one person the CEO. Right. So to keep each and everyone accountable, he did this with an alloyed commitment and energy, which earned him admiration, right, from the employees and his contemporaries. Right. So he began to focus on the operations of the company, and this resulted in great success. Right. This resulted in great success. Very, very important. So we are being told here that now the CEO was clear in his thinking and strategy. We are talking about vision. Vision here. Vision is your future state. The CEO was clear in his thinking and strategy that the model must efficiently deliver quality outputs, since the future success of the company depends on that, as any lapses could cause electrical fire to properties of customers and damage the company's reputation. So the CEO is saying here that, this is very, very clear in his thinking, right? In terms of the business model, right? So he wants the business model to operate in such a way that the CEO is completely in charge with the operations of the company, so that he can concentrate on delivering good quality products, right? Good quality products, so that there are no defects with the product which can harm the reputation of the company, right? So very, very important. So there are a couple of things here to note. We have talked about Mr. Asari Blankson, right? We have talked about his international exposure, his vision. We've talked about the CEO. He stepped down as CEO, right? And then he gave the position to another person, right? We've talked about all of that. And then we've also talked about how the business model, they want the business model to run so that it ensures that the company delivers very, very good quality products. So in pursuant of this business model, there was an initial heavy investment in the state-of-the-art machines and technology to meet the standards regarding quality of cables. All right, so it's very, very important to understand here that when we talk about a business model, right, you might have heard the term business model. What is a business model? A business model is simply, a system that is designed by a business, which shows the business how it intends to translate inputs into outputs, how it intends to translate raw materials into finished products, how it intends to translate, crude or raw materials into outputs. So that's the business model. Right. So in pursuance of this business model, the company decided to invest heavily in machines and technology. That's very, very interesting. That's very, very interesting. Now, when I'm thinking about business model, what comes to mind is the value chain. The value chain. Now, you cannot go into this exam without knowing what the value chain is. You should know what the value chain is. So the value chain is basically the processes that an organization engages in to add value to to products, to create products. It's very, very important. Right, to understand the value chain. The value chain, you have your inbound logistics, you have your operation, outbound logistics. You also have your support activities, which includes your infrastructure, your human resources, right? And you also have your technology. These are all support activities. Now, we are being told of technology here. So you need to know the value chain. Now, in my previous lectures, I've explained the value chain. If you haven't watched the video, please do so. Right, so this was to match and rival the two existing competitors and to minimize, if not eliminate, rampant fire incidents associated with the use of inferior cables in Ghana. So you see, here we are talking about competition and creating good products, right? We're creating good products in order to ensure that it does not cause fire outbreak. So immediately your mind should go to critical success factors. Critical success factors. Now, what are critical success factors? Right? What are critical success factors? The name suggests what it is, right? So when you're creating a product, there are certain things that must go right or must go well. So the things that are critical to the success of the product, those are what we call critical success factors, right? It's just like you cannot design a phone which cannot make a call. Like, what's the point of your phone that cannot make a call? What's the point of a cable, right, that cannot safely transmit electrical energy and causes fire outbreaks? So that's very, very important. So this was to match and rival the two existing competitors. So they are trying to differentiate themselves by ensuring that they produce very, very good cables. So in my recent lectures, I've been talking about the differentiation strategy, the price strategy, the cost leadership strategy, and I've been talking about the focus strategy, right? So here, it looks like TCWL is trying to differentiate itself from competition by reducing the incidence of fire, right? One thing you need to also know is that in all this, you need to assess what the target market is, right? The target market. Now, safety reputation was critical to the survival of the company. Safety reputation was critical to the survival of the company and the industry in general. So safety is very, very critical. You see, the word critical success factors was critical to the survival of the company. You can see it here. Like the other two competitors, the company made over 4 million initial investment, acquisition of factory, land, building. Now, I didn't mention them, but it's important to mention this. When you hear machines and technology, you should think about capital expenditure. You should know how much it's costing them and how it's affecting their bottom line and their financials, right? So here we are being told that they are spending over 4 million in the acquisition of factory land and building, plant and machinery, such as crushing and grinding machine, drawing equipment, heating, insulation, twisting and stranding and extrusion machines. So they are investing heavily, right? And when you are investing into capital expenditure, you are hoping that this in turn improve the quality of your product, which hopefully would help you to gain or propel your revenue. Very, very important. Now, another thing too, when you hear about these investments, is that where are they trying to acquire these machines from? Is it local or is it foreign, right? If it's foreign, then, do they have a relationship with the supplier? How much will it cost to transport this machine from wherever it is into Ghana? So we are being told here is that these are world-class machines and not available locally, and therefore imported from the UK and the US, right? So if they're imported from the UK and the US, they are most likely priced in pounds and dollars respectively. So we need to understand what are the currency rates, right? If the currency rates are bad, then it means that they are going to convert a lot of CDs to purchase this, right? Although the company has endeavored over the years to maintain these expensive equipment and machinery, it has nevertheless been difficult because of the dependence on foreigner expertise. Right? So maintenance here is an issue, and they do not have the requisite local expertise to be able to maintain these equipment. Very, very important. This situation is not unique to the company. The company has sponsored its engineers to train abroad. So here you are looking at training, right? So you have cost of equipment, cost of machines. You might have possible currency translation issues because of the Ghana cedi to the dollar and to the pound. You also have lack of local expertise to maintain, the machines. And you also, have to think of training if you would have to train local engineers to do this. Now, where this is heading towards, we are going to have potentially, I believe, a problem with people or resources, human resources. So let's move on and see. The company has sponsored its engineers to train abroad, but the retention rate has been low in the past, right? So you see, when it comes to HR, one of the important things is to understand retention, recruitment, training, and development, right? So recruitment is basically bringing people in. Training and development is essentially getting them upskilled, and retention is keeping them. Here we see that the company is struggling to keep the people, so they've abandoned the strategy. So when you see something like this, you should also think about retention strategies. How can you retain your people in the organization? Right? How can you retain your people in the organization? One of the ways people retain their employees in the organization is through, the benefits they give them, the contract that they give them, right? During the contract, it will have, certain clauses that sort of keep them in the organization. But there are several ways which we'll touch on later. So further, but I entreat you to think about some of them. Further, the company had to rely on externally trained high-skilled labor with a proper level of experience to manage its production and quality departments, since same cannot be obtained locally. So this is also another cost. And when you're thinking about strategic implications, you need to think about this. How can they raise internal people who can handle their machines without them leaving? So you have these people who are foreigners who have the skill, but it's quite expensive, although very expensive. So if you are even told these employees met both local and international standards and have assisted the company in building its quality reputation. You see, we've talked about it, So as you are reading it, you tend to get ideas. Now, one thing I didn't mention, which I think is very, very important, is the product life cycle. I touched on it in my previous video. So as you're reading the case or the pre-sale material, you want to know the journey of the product through the different stages of the life cycle. You want to know the introductory phase to the growth phase, to the maturity phase, to the decline phase. So at this point, you are trying to suss out for TCWL, you are trying to figure out which stage in the product life cycle are they in. Are they in the introductory or the growth phase? All right, so very, very important. So although very expensive, these employees met both local and international standards. So very, very important that TCWL came into this industry at a later date, came to meet, I think, both Metalex and PCGL, which is the very first, right? And must find creative ways to be able to dominate in the market. So the company has identified some critical success factors which have influenced its strategic purpose and corporate objectives. Now, we talked about this essentially, right? So I'm going through this case study very fresh, just like a pre-sale material, like someone who hasn't seen this before. Right? I'm just going through as a normal student will have to go through, right? So you do not have to see a pre-sale material to, the first time you can go through and draw many insights from it. So these factors continue to drive the company's competitive advantage, right? These factors continue to drive the company's advantage. The identified CSF include customer satisfaction. So the case has been good enough to give us the critical success factors. You have customer satisfaction, you have nationwide distribution network, you have cutting edge technology and innovation, you have the quality of cables, strict compliance with regulatory standards, production of environmentally friendly cables, and highly trained and dedicated employees. So these are all critical success factors, things that must go right in order for the company to achieve its objectives. Very, very, very important. So I hope this is quite clear to you, right? So what do you do with critical success factors? You don't just, you don't just write them down and hope they happen. We've talked about this in our past lectures, right? So for critical success factors, one of the things you need to know, which is very, very important, is you cannot talk about critical success factors without talking about KPIs and vice versa. Once you know critical success factors, you try to set key performance indicators. Along those lines, you need to set targets for achieving those critical success factors. So, for example, when you pick quality of cables, which is a critical success factor, you try and set targets, internal targets, that will help you to hit that, right? So to ensure the quality of cables, you need to ensure that where you are buying the cables from, where you are buying the raw materials for the cables from, the supplier is actually legit, right? So that they are not giving you any fake raw material. So you set targets along the lines of the critical success factor. The CEO argues that financial performance is intricately linked to excellent performance in the above C critical success factors. Right? So yes, which is very, very true. Yeah. How well you achieve your critical success factors will determine how well you do financially as an organization. There are pressure groups as well as large consumers increasingly demanding for products that are environmentally friendly. So, a student who is just reading this casually will not see this. But when I read this, there are pressure groups as well as large consumers. My mind immediately goes to the stakeholder matrix, right? In the stakeholder matrix, you have internal stakeholders, you have external stakeholders, and they all have their own interests. And this interest must be taken into consideration when it comes to your strategy as an organization, right? So we are being told here that pressure groups are demanding for products that are environmentally friendly. Right? So that's their interests. That's what they want. And you need to understand the stakeholder matrix in terms of the power of stakeholders and the interest of stakeholders. Some stakeholders have high power, low interest. Some stakeholders have high power, low interest. But these are all essential things that you need to figure out when it comes to the company. Now, we've touched on a lot of things here. But it's important that if you have any questions, you drop it in the comment section, and I'll definitely respond to it. So now let's move into the vision, mission, and corporate values of the company. So we've talked about intro, we talked briefly about TCWL. Now let's look at the mission, the vision, and corporate value. We are being told here that Mr. Asari is a strong believer in Pan-Africanism. Now, before I even start this, one of the things we are talking about in our previous discussion was around, we haven't touched yet on the team that's around Mr. Asari, right? Who is his financial CFO? Who is his chief marketing officer? We only know about the CEO and the board chairman. So it will be, to build a successful company, you need a strong team. So it will be nice to know. But as we go, we might find out. So Mr. Asari is a strong believer in Pan-Africanism, and therefore holds the view that Ghana and Africa should build its own corporate giants that can compete globally, right? So this is his belief, and his belief will then drive the vision, right? So the vision is to become an African industrial giant in cables and wires manufacturing. So the vision is the desired future state of the organization. The mission is the reason for existence, the purpose of the organization, which is to manufacture high quality and safe cables for our valued customers using the best human and material resources and state-of-the-art technology that minimizes negative environmental impact of our products. All right, so if you even look at the mission, there are a lot of things that you can bring out. Right, quality, you can bring out resources, human and material, you can bring out technology, and you can bring out environmental friendliness. The success of the company has been built on 6 core values, right? So we've been told the vision, we've been told the mission, now we are moving on to the values. The CEO has intentionally inculcated these values in the way things are done in the company, right? So we are looking at the culture of the company here. These values, according to the CEO, must not merely remain written words, but must find expression in how value is created for customers, and ultimately must be the common denominator that drives all activities in the company, right? So you have these values. You have service, knowledge, integrity, leadership, loyalty, sustainability. So if you look at it as an acronym, you have S, right? KILLS, which is skills. Skills. So let's look at the first one, service. Service. So these values are what will drive the the operations of the organization. In future, we will talk about the McKinsey 7S model. McKinsey 7S model, which basically looks at the different aspects to a business, right? The different aspects to a business and how these aspects work together to deliver, a solid organization, So we would look into that at a later time. But let's focus on what are the core values. You have service, you have knowledge, you have integrity, you have leadership, you have loyalty, you have sustainability. So what's service? This entails the duty the company owes to deliver high quality products and services to all customers, as well as meeting the expectations of stakeholders. So that's service. You have knowledge. The company has a duty to obtain and apply appropriate and up-to-date knowledge. You have integrity, which is honesty and transparency and ethics. You have leadership, which is leadership by example. You have loyalty, where the company pledges loyalty to its vision, mission, and to one another. And you have sustainability, right, which talks about the environment and the health of the planet. So please take note of these values. And if anything is contradicting any of these values, you might want to look into it or call it out. So up till now, we haven't been told anything yet around the price of these cables. We know they have a huge investment into specialized, skilled people. We know they have a huge investment into machines. But we haven't been told anything around the price of these cables, how much they sell in a year, how their competition is going, all that kind of stuff we haven't been told yet. So I'm curious to see how this thing pans out. So aside the above cherished core values, the company is also very focused on strict compliance and enforcement of health and safety. The company recognizes human capital. So people are a main source of value creation. So the company seeks to protect its people, and give them a safe working environment. Right. So in our next lecture, we'll be talking about corporate social responsibility and achievement. Right. So that's what we'll be talking about. Now, I want you to ask any possible questions you might have. The models that I've mentioned, I've touched on them in my previous videos. I want you to go have a look at them in this case study. So I want you to go have a look at them, try and understand them, look at the SWOT analysis, look at the PESTEL framework, look at Porter's 5 forces, right? Porter's 5 forces will talk about the bargaining power of suppliers, bargaining power of customers, the rivalry between, competitors. Try and find out these models. Look at the product life cycle and try and relate them to what we are discussing, because they are very, very crucial. So if you haven't looked into these models, please start doing so. I have a whole video on key models and you might want to look into that as well. But if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. And thank you for your time. And we'll meet again. Bye-bye.